Get out. You have 7 days. Victor didn't even look at me when he said it. He just slid the papers across the table like he was passing a receipt. Divorce papers. Sophie stood a few steps behind him, arms folded, her expression calm, too calm. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The look in her eyes said everything. She had already taken my place. Mom? He said quietly, then stopped like he wasn't sure which side of the room he belonged to. My son, Ethan, was in the doorway. He froze when he saw the papers in my hands. For a second, I thought he might say something. Anything. But he didn't. Something about the way he said it felt practiced. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just stared at the signature line and understood something quietly, deeply unsettling. This wasn't anger. This wasn't a fight. It had been decided long before this moment. Everything is in my name, Victor added, finally glancing up. His tone was flat, controlled. The house, the company, all of it. No hesitation, no apology, just facts. You never really handled the finances anyway, he added, almost casually. The room held its breath. Even the ticking clock on the wall seemed louder than usual. I nodded once. That was all. I opened the drawer out of habit and then closed it again. There was nothing in there that was actually mine. It wasn't the first time he had taken something from me. It was just the first time he said it out loud. He used to tell me after the fact, not ask. That night, I packed a single suitcase. I left the photo on the table without taking it. 40 years of marriage reduced to clothes, a few photographs, and a wooden box I hadn't opened in decades. I moved slowly through the house, touching things without really seeing them. The kitchen counter, the back of a chair, the edge of the door frame where I used to measure the kids' height. No one stopped me. Not even a simple wait. Not even my name. Sophie stayed in the living room. Victor poured himself a drink. Ethan disappeared upstairs. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a removal. When I reached the front door, I paused. Not because I wanted to stay, but because something about the way they watched me leave felt final. Too final, like they believed there was nothing left of me outside that door. They were wrong. They just didn't know it yet. My name is Gloria Hudson. I'm 68 years old. And that was the night I lost everything I thought I owned. I stepped out into the evening air with my suitcase in hand. The sky had already turned dark, the streetlights flickering on one by one. I stood there for a moment, unsure which direction to go, as if the ground itself had shifted under my feet. To anyone passing by, I probably looked like a woman leaving for a short trip, not someone being erased. I started walking. The neighborhood was quiet, almost indifferent. The same houses, the same trimmed lawns, the same world I had lived in for decades, moving forward without me. If you've ever felt like your life changed in a single conversation, like something you built slowly over years disappeared in minutes, tell me where you're watching from. Because I thought I had lost everything. I didn't even know where I was going. Stay with me. Because what happened next, I never could have predicted. I walked past the corner where Ethan used to wait for the school bus, past the small cafe Victor and I used to visit on Sunday mornings. Every step felt familiar, but nothing belonged to me anymore. My mind kept replaying his words. Everything is in my name. I should have seen it earlier, the way he handled the accounts, the way decisions became announcements instead of conversations, the way I slowly stepped back without even realizing it. It didn't happen all at once. It happened quietly, like a door closing inch by inch, By the time I reached the end of the block, the house was no longer visible behind me. I adjusted my grip on the suitcase. It wasn't heavy. That was the strangest part. After 4 decades, there was so little I could actually carry. But the weight I felt had nothing to do with what was in my hands. It was everything I hadn't taken with me. The silence of that house, the absence of resistance, the certainty in Victor's voice. None of it was accidental. And as I kept walking into the night, one thought settled in slowly. I had nowhere to go. Not a plan, not a backup, just a suitcase, and whatever I could carry. And I didn't realize it yet. But by the time I stopped walking, I would have exactly $3 left. The night air grew colder the farther I walked. I didn't notice it at first. My mind was still back in that kitchen, replaying every word, every look, every quiet moment where something should have been said, but wasn't. By the time my steps slowed, I found myself standing at the edge of Millennium Park. The city lights stretched across the dark sky, reflecting off glass and steel, indifferent to everything that had just ended for me. People passed by in pairs, in small groups, their conversations soft and distant. I kept moving until I couldn't anymore. A wooden bench sat just off the path, empty. I set my suitcase down beside it and lowered myself slowly, as if I needed to make sure the ground would actually hold me. For a moment, I didn't move. I just sat there, hands resting in my lap, staring straight ahead while the world continued without me. Then I reached into my purse. I didn't know what I was looking for. Habit, maybe. Something familiar. My fingers brushed against small, ordinary things. A folded receipt, an old lipstick, a set of keys that no longer opened anything that belonged to me. And then I found the money. I pulled it out slowly. I checked again. Same number, like maybe I had missed something the first time. $3, 2 worn bills, and a coin. I turned them over in my hand, as if the number might change if I looked at it long enough. 40 years. A house, a marriage, a life that felt permanent, reduced to $3 on a park bench. A breath slipped out of me. Quiet, almost unrecognizable. Not quite a laugh, not quite anything else. I folded the bills carefully and placed them back in my purse, slower this time. Because right now, they mattered. They were all I had. A light breeze moved through the trees, brushing against my face. I closed my eyes for a second, letting the cold settle into my skin. And that was when I felt it. Something solid, buried beneath everything else. I paused, my fingers still, then searched again, more deliberately this time. The wooden box. I pulled it out and held it in both hands. I hadn't opened it in years, not since my father gave it to me. The surface was worn smooth, edges softened with time. I traced it with my thumb, remembering the way he used to hold it, quietly, like it wasn't meant for anyone else to notice. He never explained things twice. If he gave you something, he expected you to remember it. Walter Green had never been a man who explained himself. He worked long days, coming home with grease on his hands, fixing things other people had already given up on. He didn't talk much about the future. But when he did, it stayed with you. "Margaret," he had said once, his voice low and steady, "there are things people show you, and things they don't." I opened the box. The card was still there. Plain, silver, no logo, no visible number, just a name engraved along the edge. Gloria Green. My maiden name. I ran my finger over the letters, feeling the indentation in the metal. It didn't look important. But I remembered the way he had given it to me. Carefully. Deliberately. Only use this if you truly need it. At the time, I didn't ask questions. I had a home, a husband, a life that felt certain, so I put the box away, and I forgot about it. Until now. I leaned back slightly, the card resting in my hand, catching a faint reflection of the city lights. My father had never been careless with anything he left behind, and he never gave me something without expecting me to understand it one day. That thought settled heavier than the cold around me. Was this what he meant? Was this moment the one he had been waiting for? I looked around the park again. No one was paying attention to me. No one noticed the woman sitting alone with a suitcase and a past that had just been erased. The world had already moved on. I closed the box halfway, then stopped. Something about putting it away again felt wrong, like ignoring it would mean losing something I didn't even understand yet. So I left it open in my lap, the card still in my hand. $3. That was what I knew for certain. Everything else wasn't. I exhaled slowly, my grip tightening just a little. If my father had held on to this for years, if he had waited this long for me to use it, then whatever this was. It wasn't small. I placed the card back into the box, but this time I didn't bury it under anything. I set it carefully inside my purse, somewhere I could reach without thinking. Not hidden, not forgotten. Just ready. For a while, I sat there, letting the night settle around me. Cars passed in the distance, voices drifted by. The rhythm of the city stayed steady, unchanged. But I wasn't. I had no plan, no destination. Just a suitcase, $3, and something my father had left behind that I had never needed. Until now. Eventually, the cold pushed me to my feet. I picked up the suitcase, my fingers tightening around the handle as I stood there for a second, looking out at the city. I didn't know what that card was. I didn't know what it would lead to. But I knew one thing. If my father had waited decades for me to use it, then whatever was behind it was worth finding out. And by morning, I was going to. Morning came quietly, not with rest, but with a kind of clarity I hadn't felt the night before. I hadn't slept much, just a few short stretches on that bench, waking up each time the cold shifted or a passing voice pulled me back into the present. By the time the sky began to lighten, I was already sitting up, the wooden box in my lap, my fingers resting over it like I needed to make sure it was still there. It was. So was the card. I stood slowly, my body stiff from the night, and reached for my suitcase. The city was different in the morning, brighter, more certain, as if everything had direction again. I didn't. But I had one place to go. I walked toward the main streets, following the flow of people heading into their day. Office buildings filled quickly. Coffee shops buzzed with quiet urgency. No one looked at me twice, just another woman walking with a suitcase. The Chase Bank branch in downtown Chicago stood at the corner of a busy intersection, glass doors reflecting the steady movement of the city around it. I paused just outside. For a moment, I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the contrast, the clean lines, the polished floors I could already see through the glass, the sense of order. It didn't match how I felt. I adjusted my grip on the suitcase, reached into my purse, and felt the edge of the wooden box again. Then I stepped inside. The air was cool and still, carrying the faint scent of paper and something sterile. A few people stood in line. Others sat in the waiting area, scrolling through their phones or glancing up at the digital screens mounted on the wall. Everything about the place felt structured, controlled, predictable. I moved toward the counter, my footsteps quieter here, absorbed by the carpet beneath me. A teller looked up as I approached, young, polite. "Good morning, how can I help you?" I hesitated for just a second, then reached into my purse and placed the card on the counter between us. I'd like to check the account connected to this. She glanced down at it. At first, her expression didn't change. Just routine focus. The kind you see in someone who's done the same thing hundreds of times. She stopped smiling. Not completely, but enough that I noticed. Then something shifted. Her fingers paused before touching the card. Just for a second, like she had seen something she wasn't expecting. Then she picked it up. "Of course," she said, her voice still polite, but quieter now. She turned toward her screen and began typing. I stood there, watching nothing in particular, my hands resting lightly against the edge of the counter. A few seconds passed, then a few more. Her posture changed, just slightly. A stiffness in her shoulders, a small adjustment in the way she leaned closer to the screen. She typed again, stopped, looked at the card, then back at the screen. "Ma'am, one moment, please." Her voice was careful now, not unsure. Careful. Before I could respond, she gathered the card and stepped away from the terminal without processing anything further on her screen, moving quickly toward the back office. I remained where I was. People moved around me, unaware of anything unusual. The line shifted. A man stepped forward behind me, glancing briefly at the empty space where the teller had been. I didn't move. I didn't follow her with my eyes either. I just stood there, feeling something begin to settle beneath the surface of everything else. Not fear, something else. Time stretched in a way that felt different from the night before. More focused, more deliberate. A door opened behind the counter. A man stepped out. Older, mid-50s maybe. Dark suit, composed, but his expression wasn't neutral. Not quite. He walked toward me with the card in his hand. "Mrs. Hudson?" His voice was steady. I nodded once. "Yes. I'm Daniel Brooks, branch manager." He extended his hand slightly, then seemed to think better of it and lowered it again. A small detail, but I noticed it. "I'd like to assist you personally, if that's all right." There was something in the way he said it. Not a question, a decision. "That's fine," I replied. He gestured toward a desk set slightly apart from the main counter area. "This way, please." I picked up my suitcase and followed him. The space he led me to was quieter, more private. A glass partition separated it from the rest of the bank, softening the sounds of movement and conversation. He waited until I sat down before taking the seat across from me. The card rested on the desk between us. For a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked at it, then at me, then back at it again. "Mrs. Hudson," he began, choosing his words carefully. "How long have you had this card?" I thought about it. "Years," I said. "I was given it a long time ago." He nodded slowly. "And have you ever used it before?" "No." Another pause. He leaned back slightly in his chair, his gaze steady now, but something in it had changed. It wasn't just professionalism anymore. It was attention, focused, intent. He reached for the card again, turning it over in his hand as if confirming something only he could see. Then he placed it back down, aligning it precisely with the edge of the desk. When he spoke again, his tone was different. Lower, more controlled. "Mrs. Hudson, before we go any further," he paused, just long enough to make the space between us feel heavier. "Because this isn't something we usually see." His eyes met mine fully now. "Do you understand what this account is?" I looked at him for a moment. "No," I said, "I don't." The word settled between us more heavily than I expected. Daniel Brooks didn't react right away. He simply nodded once, as if that answer confirmed something he had already suspected. Then he reached for his keyboard. "If you don't mind," he said quietly, "I'll need to verify a few details before I proceed." I nodded. He turned slightly, angling the screen away from me out of habit, and began typing. His movements were precise, controlled, but there was a tension in them now, a carefulness that hadn't been there before. I sat still, my hands resting lightly on the edge of the desk. The card remained between us. A few seconds passed, then a few more. The faint clicking of keys filled the space, steady at first, then slower. Then it stopped. Daniel didn't move right away. His eyes stayed on the screen. Something in his expression shifted, just slightly. Not shock, not confusion, recognition. He blinked once as if making sure what he was seeing hadn't changed. Then his posture straightened. "Mrs. Hudson," he said, his voice lower now, more measured than before. "This account has been active for quite some time." I felt my fingers tighten slightly against the edge of the desk. "How long?" I asked. He hesitated. "Just over 30 years. 30. The number didn't settle easily in my mind. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out right away. 30 years meant this account had existed long before anything in my life had begun to shift. Before the distance in my marriage. Before the quiet changes I hadn't noticed until it was too late. Before everything. "That's not possible," I said softly. But even as I said it, something in me already knew it was. Daniel didn't challenge the statement. He simply turned the screen slightly, just enough for me to see. Rows of numbers, balances, transactions, more than I could process at once. At first, none of it made sense. My eyes moved across the screen, searching for something familiar, something I could anchor myself to. Then they landed on a number and stopped. I didn't react immediately. I just looked at it, tried to process it, but the number didn't change. It didn't shrink. It didn't correct itself. It stayed exactly where it was. Too large, too precise, too real. "That can't be right," I said, more to myself than to him. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Daniel didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for a folder, opened it, and began confirming entries against the screen, one by one. "It is correct," he said finally. No hesitation, no doubt, just certainty. I leaned back slightly in the chair, my breath catching in a way I couldn't control. Millions. Not a mistake, not a misunderstanding, a fact. I just stared at the screen, trying to understand what I was looking at. I didn't know how to feel. Tell me honestly, would you feel relieved or afraid in that moment? And stay with me, because this wasn't even the biggest truth yet. A strange stillness moved through me. Not relief, not even shock exactly. Something quieter, like the moment just before you realize everything you believed about your life might not be true. How I started, then stopped. There wasn't a simple way to ask the question. Daniel seemed to understand that. "This account," he said carefully, "was established under a holding structure. Long-term investments, compounding returns, diversified assets." He paused briefly, then added in a lower tone, "This isn't a typical account." The words carried weight. This wasn't something new. This wasn't something sudden. This had been built. Over time, without me knowing. I looked back at the screen. The number was still there, unchanged, a life I didn't recognize. I paused, trying to steady my voice. "I've never seen any of this before." "I believe that's intentional," Daniel replied. I looked at him. "What do you mean?" He folded his hands lightly on the desk, choosing his next words with more care than before. "This type of account can be structured in a way that limits standard reporting. No mailed statements, no routine notifications. It remains dormant, in a sense, until accessed directly. Until now? The thought settled quietly. I hadn't known, because I wasn't meant to. I glanced down at my purse where the wooden box rested inside. My father's voice echoed faintly in my memory. Only use this if you truly need it. My fingers tightened slightly. Was this what he meant? Was this what he had been protecting? The room felt smaller suddenly. Not physically, but in a way that made everything sharper, every detail more defined. You're saying, I began slowly, this has always been here? Yes. And no one else has accessed it? Not without this card and proper authorization. A quiet realization moved through me then. Victor. The house, the company. Everything is in my name. The certainty in his voice, the control. And yet, none of this had ever been his. I didn't say that out loud, but the thought was there now, clearer than anything else. I looked back at the screen one more time, at the number, at everything it represented. It didn't feel like mine, not yet. It felt like something I had just stepped into, without understanding the rules, without understanding the cost. I exhaled slowly, my eyes lifting to meet Daniel's again. If this account is mine, my voice was steadier now, more focused. Then what else don't I know? He didn't answer immediately, but something in his expression shifted again. Subtle. Careful. Like the next thing he was about to say mattered more than anything that had come before. And I had a feeling he hadn't trusted anyone else to find it. I didn't realize it then. This wasn't the answer. It was only the first layer of something my father had left behind. And whatever came next was going to change everything I thought I knew. Daniel didn't answer my question right away. He studied me for a moment, as if weighing how much to say and how quickly. Then he reached for the wooden box. "May I?" he asked. I hesitated for a second, then nodded. He opened it carefully, his movements slower now, more deliberate than before. When he lifted the card, something inside the box shifted. A faint click I hadn't noticed before. A thin panel loosened. Daniel paused, then pressed lightly along the edge. A hidden compartment slid open. I leaned forward without meaning to. I hadn't seen that before. Inside was a small device. Dark, compact. No label, no markings that explained what it was. "That's not standard," Daniel said quietly. My chest tightened. "Can you play it?" I asked. He nodded. Within a minute, he had connected it to a secure terminal. The screen dimmed slightly as the file loaded, the soft hum of the system filling the space between us. Then, a voice. "Margaret." Everything in me stopped. He always used my full name when it mattered. "If you're hearing this, then something has changed." I didn't move. Daniel didn't speak. "You always trusted people more than you should," my father continued. "That's not a weakness, but it is something the world will use against you, if you let it." The words didn't rush, they settled, heavy, certain. "I didn't build this for the life you thought you had," he said. "I built it for the moment that life no longer protected you." My fingers curled slowly against the desk. Built this. "This account," he went on, "is only the surface." Daniel glanced at me, but I kept my eyes on the screen. "You are listed as the primary holder," my father said. "But more importantly, you are the controlling interest behind Green Holdings." The name hit me in a way I couldn't explain. Green. My maiden name. I felt my breath catch. I hadn't even known the name before that moment. The structure is layered, he continued. It was designed that way so that no one could trace it back to you unless you chose to reveal it. My pulse quickened. And if you've reached the point where you're listening to this, then I trust you've already realized something important. A brief pause. What appears to belong to others doesn't always. The room felt sharper, clearer. You own 51%, he said. The number didn't just land, it shifted something. Not just because of what it meant, but because of everything it changed. Not just of the holdings, he added, but of the operating company itself. I shook my head slightly, trying to line the words up into something that made sense. That doesn't make sense, I said under my breath. Daniel didn't interrupt. He just listened. The company you know, my father said calmly, the one built in your husband's name, runs under the structure I created. My breath caught. No. That means, he continued, you are the majority owner. The words didn't hit all at once. They moved through me slowly. Layer by layer, majority owner of the company. The same company Victor had claimed, without hesitation, was entirely his. Everything is in my name. The memory returned. But now it sounded different. Not confidence, not control. Assumption. A dangerous one. I made sure you would never need this unless something went wrong, my father said. But if it did, I also made sure you would never be powerless. The recording ended without warning. Just silence. Daniel powered the screen down slowly. Neither of us spoke. I sat there, trying to hold everything in place long enough to understand it. It didn't fit. Not yet. You're saying, I began, my voice quieter now, steadier, that the company Victor runs, Daniel nodded once, is part of the structure you control. I looked at him fully. And he doesn't know? No. No hesitation. And legally? It's already in place, he said. This isn't something that needs to be claimed. It exists. He leaned forward slightly, his tone more precise now. Green Trust Holdings maintains majority control through layered subsidiaries. The operating company sits under that structure, indirectly, but completely. I let that settle. Not emotionally, logically. This wasn't chaos. It was a system. One that had been built carefully, quietly, and left untouched. Until now. I thought about Victor again. The certainty in his voice, the way he handed me those papers, the way he looked at me like I was already gone. He hadn't lied. He just never knew. And neither had I. Until now. Everything is in my name. I heard it again, but this time, it didn't sound the same. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. More than I expected. This wasn't anger, not yet. It wasn't satisfaction either. It was something colder, clearer, understanding. For the first time since I walked out of that house, I wasn't reacting. I was seeing. Really seeing. This changes things, I said quietly. Daniel met my gaze. Yes, he replied. It does. I leaned back slightly, letting the weight of it settle. $3. That was what I had left when I sat on that bench. And now, this. Not luck, not chance, something planned, left behind by someone who had understood something I hadn't. I exhaled slowly, and for the first time since I walked out of that house, I wasn't trying to survive anymore. I was trying to understand what I was about to walk back into. I didn't leave the bank right away. For a few minutes, I just sat there, letting everything settle into something I could actually use, not react to. Use. Daniel remained across from me, patient, waiting without pushing. He seemed to understand that whatever came next wasn't about information anymore. It was about what I was going to do with it. When is the next board meeting? I asked. He didn't look surprised. Instead, he reached for a folder beside him, flipping it open with quiet precision. There's an executive event this afternoon, he said. Annual expansion review. Most of the senior leadership will be there. I nodded slowly. Of course they would be. Victor liked those kinds of events. Controlled environments, carefully curated conversations. Places where everything looked exactly the way he wanted it to. And access? I asked. Daniel met my gaze. You won't need permission, he said. Not technically. That word stayed with me. Technically. But, I pressed. But, he continued, choosing his words carefully. No one there is expecting you to walk in as anything other than... He paused. His wife? I let that sit. Former wife. Something close to that. Good, I said quietly. Daniel didn't respond immediately, but something in his expression shifted again. Subtle, measured. You should be prepared, he added. What you have, it's leverage, but how you present it will determine everything that follows. I stood slowly, picking up my suitcase without thinking. Then I stopped. The suitcase, it didn't belong in that room anymore. I looked at it for a moment, then back at Daniel. Can you hold this for me? I asked. He nodded. Of course. I left it there. Not as something I was abandoning, but as something I didn't need to carry into what came next. When I stepped outside, the city felt different. Not because anything had changed, but because I had. The streets were still busy, the same steady rhythm of people moving from one place to another, each with their own purpose, their own direction. For the first time that day, I had one too. I didn't rush. There was no reason to. Instead, I walked, back through the same streets I had passed earlier that morning, past the glass buildings, past the cafes, past everything that had felt distant just hours before. Now it all felt aligned, like I had missed something all these years, and was only now seeing it clearly. Hudson Industrial Systems stood several blocks away, its headquarters rising clean and sharp against the skyline. I had been there before, of course, dozens of times, but never like this. Before, I had entered as someone attached to Victor. Now, I wasn't sure what I was walking in as, but I knew it wasn't that. I paused across the street, taking in the building from a distance. People moved in and out of the main entrance, their pace quick, purposeful, security at the front, reception visible through the glass. Everything looked normal. That was the point. I reached into my purse, my fingers brushing briefly against the wooden box before settling. Still there. Still real. I crossed the street. Step by step, I moved closer, the sound of the city softening behind me as the building filled my view. The doors opened automatically as I approached. Cool air, polished floors, the quiet hum of a corporate space in motion. I stepped inside. No one stopped me. Not immediately. A receptionist glanced up, her expression polite, professional. Good afternoon, she said. Do you have an appointment? I met her gaze. Not exactly, I replied. There was a brief pause, just long enough for her to reassess. May I ask who you're here to see? I could feel the shift already. Subtle. But there. I'm here for the executive event, I said. Her eyes flicked toward the system in front of her, then back to me. And your name? I didn't hesitate. Gloria Hudson. The name settled into the space differently than it had before. Not just familiar, recognized. The receptionist's posture adjusted slightly, not dramatically, but enough. Yes, you're listed, she said with a hint of hesitation. She stood, reaching for a badge. This will give you access to the main floor and the executive level. I accepted it. Thank you. As I clipped it into place, I caught a glimpse of myself in the reflection of the glass behind her. Same face, same expression. But something else had changed. Something quieter, more certain. The elevator ride was silent. A few others stepped in with me, exchanging polite nods, brief glances. No one asked questions. No one needed to. They assumed I belonged. The doors opened on the executive floor. Voices carried faintly down the hall. Laughter. Conversations layered over each other in a controlled kind of energy. The event had already started. I stepped out. The space ahead was open, polished, filled with people who moved like they knew exactly where they stood in the world. I walked forward slowly. No rush, no hesitation. Just awareness. Every step deliberate. Every detail sharper than before. And as I moved closer to the center of the room, I could already see them. Victor, Sophie, standing exactly where they believed they should be, like nothing had ever been questioned. I stopped just short of the entrance. Not because I wasn't ready, but because for the first time since everything began, I understood exactly what I was walking into. And I was going to make sure I didn't waste it. I stepped into the room. No one noticed at first. Conversations carried on, glasses clinked softly, voices overlapping in that controlled, confident way people had when they believed everything around them was stable. Then someone turned. A glance. A pause. And just like that, the ripple began. It moved quietly at first, one person noticing, then another. A shift in posture, a slight change in tone, conversations trailing off just enough to make space for something unexpected. For me. A few conversations faltered mid-sentence. Someone near the bar lowered their glass without taking a sip. Two people standing by the window leaned closer, their voices dropping into a quiet murmur. No one moved toward me, but no one looked away either. It wasn't loud, not dramatic, just a shift. The kind that spreads without asking permission. Eyes lingered a second longer than they should have. A smile here, a polite nod there, small things that suddenly felt out of place. Even the music seemed quieter, like the room itself was holding something back. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The attention had already moved. Victor saw me last. He was standing near the center, one hand loosely holding a glass, the other resting at his side. Sophie stood beside him, close enough to suggest more than professionalism. Her expression composed, effortless. He didn't react immediately, just looked, as if I didn't quite belong in the frame he had built. Then he smiled, not warmly, politely, controlled. "Gloria," he said, his voice carrying just enough to draw attention without raising it. "I wasn't aware you were invited." A few people nearby turned fully now, waiting. I didn't move closer. I didn't need to. "I didn't realize I needed one," I replied. My voice was even, calm, not louder than his, but clear enough. The room didn't go silent, but it leaned in. Victor's smile didn't drop, but something behind it shifted. "This is a private executive event," he said. "Not really the place for—" He paused, just long enough. "Unexpected appearances." There it was, not anger, dismissal. Sophie let out a small, almost inaudible breath beside him, the corner of her mouth lifting just slightly. I noticed. So did a few others. "I'll only take a moment," I said. Victor took a step forward now, closing the distance just enough to make the interaction feel contained. Personal. "Gloria," he said quietly, though everyone could still hear him. "This isn't necessary." Necessary. The word hung there, deliberate. "I think it is," I replied. Another pause. Longer this time. Victor's gaze sharpened slightly, his patience thinning just enough to show. You've made your position clear, he said. And I've made mine. There's nothing more to discuss. There was a soft murmur from somewhere behind him. Not agreement, not disagreement, just awareness. And they felt it. I reached into my purse. That was enough. Enough to shift the room again. Victor noticed it immediately. His eyes dropped briefly to my hand. "What are you doing?" he asked, the calm in his voice tightening just a fraction. I didn't answer. Instead, I pulled out the card. And for the first time since I walked in, I let them see it. The same one I had placed on the bank counter just hours earlier. Simple, unmarked, but no longer meaningless. I held it between my fingers, not raising it, not presenting it, just letting it exist in the space between us. Victor frowned slightly. "That's not going to change anything," he said. He said it like he'd said it before, just not out loud. "You're out of this." He believed that. Completely. "That's what I thought too," I replied. A few heads turned toward each other now, quiet exchanges happening under their breath. The kind that didn't interrupt, but didn't ignore either. I stepped forward. Just one step, enough to shift the distance between us. "I learned something this morning," I said. Victor's expression didn't change, but Sophie's did, barely. Her posture stiffened, just for a second. "I'm not sure what you think you're trying to prove," Victor said a little louder now, reclaiming the space. "But this isn't the place for—" "I'm not trying to prove anything," I interrupted. Not sharp, not aggressive, just final. The interruption landed harder than if I had raised my voice, because I hadn't done that before. Victor stopped, just for a moment, and in that moment, something shifted. Not in him, in the room. I glanced past him, toward the large presentation screen mounted at the front. It was already active, displaying slides from the ongoing review, financial summaries, growth projections, corporate structure, familiar but not complete. "Is this your current ownership structure?" I asked, my gaze still on the screen. Victor followed it, then looked back at me. "Yes," he said. "That's correct. Confident. Immediate." "Are you sure?" I asked. That was enough. Enough to draw the attention of people who hadn't been listening before. A few members of the board, standing further back, shifted slightly. One of them, Harold Bennett, tilted his head, his expression tightening as he looked from me to the screen. "What exactly are you suggesting?" Victor asked. I didn't answer him directly. Instead, I turned slightly, addressing the room. Not loudly, but clearly enough to carry. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said. That word again. Misunderstanding. But this time, it didn't sound small. It sounded structural. Victor's jaw tightened. "This isn't appropriate," he said, his voice losing some of its earlier smoothness. "If you have a concern, we can discuss it privately." "No," I said, a simple word, but it stopped him. "We can't." Another pause. This one heavier, because now people were no longer pretending not to listen. They were watching. I stepped closer to the screen, not touching it, not yet. Just standing beside it, close enough that the numbers reflected faintly in the glass behind me. "I spent the last few hours learning something I should have known a long time ago," I said. My voice didn't shake. It didn't rise, but it carried. I had spent years thinking I had nothing. I just didn't know where to look. And it turns out, I paused just long enough to feel the room settle completely. What's on this screen isn't the full picture. Silence, not complete, but close. Victor didn't move. Sophie didn't speak. No one interrupted, because something had already changed. They just didn't know what yet. And for the first time, they realized they didn't know what I was about to say, and that they might have been wrong about me all along. The silence didn't break all at once. It shifted, subtle at first, like the room was trying to decide whether to hold its shape or collapse into something else. Victor recovered first. Of course he did. He let out a quiet breath, a faint shake of his head, like he had just witnessed something mildly inconvenient. "This has gone far enough," he said, his tone steady again. "If you have concerns, we'll address them in the boardroom. Not here." There it was, the line he thought he still controlled. I nodded once. That's exactly where this needs to go. A few of the board members exchanged glances. Harold Bennett stepped forward slightly, his expression no longer neutral. "Let's move this inside," he said. No one objected. The transition was quick. Conversations faded. The casual energy of the event gave way to something tighter, more contained. Doors closed behind us as we entered the boardroom, the air inside cooler, heavier, formal, structured, controlled, the way Victor liked it. He took his usual seat at the head of the table without hesitation. Reflex. Sophie remained standing just behind him. Close, but not seated, not part of this room. Not really. I stayed on my feet. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Victor leaned forward slightly, folding his hands together. "All right," he said. "Let's get this over with." His eyes settled on me. "What exactly do you think you've discovered?" There was a faint edge to his voice now, not visible to everyone, but there. I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked around the room. Each face, each reaction. Waiting. Then I stepped toward the screen. "This," I said, gesturing lightly, "is what you've been presenting as the ownership structure." Victor didn't move. "Because it is," he replied. "Is it?" I asked. A pause. Not long, but enough. I turned to Daniel, who had entered quietly and now stood near the far end of the table. "Can you bring up the full structure?" I asked. Victor's head turned sharply. "What is he doing here?" he demanded. Daniel didn't respond to him. He simply stepped forward, placed a folder on the table, and connected a device to the system. The screen flickered, then changed. New data. Layered. More complex. Not the simplified version that had been shown outside. This one was deeper. I watched their expressions shift, one by one. Harold leaned forward. "What is this?" he asked. "The complete ownership structure," Daniel said calmly. Victor stood. "This is inappropriate," he snapped. "That information isn't authorized for—" "It is?" I said. He stopped. Not because I raised my voice, because I didn't. I just said it, and the room felt it. Daniel continued. "Green Trust Holdings maintains majority control through a layered series of subsidiaries." A few members shifted in their seats. Papers moved, eyes narrowed. Victor's expression hardened. "This is a misinterpretation of—" "It's not," Daniel said, flat, certain. He highlighted another section. "The controlling interest holder is listed here." The room went still. Every eye moved to the screen, to the name, Gloria Hudson. No one spoke, because no one had expected that name. Someone near the table whispered, "Wait, that means she owns it." Harold was the first to react. "That's not possible," he said, though there was less certainty in his voice now. "It is," Daniel replied. Victor looked from the screen to me, then back again. "No," he said. "This isn't right. That structure was never—" "It was," I said. He turned toward me fully. For the first time, uncertain. "You've been operating under it this entire time," I continued. "You just didn't know who actually controlled it." A murmur moved through the room, low, contained, but impossible to ignore. Sophie stepped forward slightly. "This doesn't prove anything," she said quickly. "Ownership structures can be misread." "It's been verified," Daniel said, "multiple times, independently." That stopped her. Victor ran a hand through his hair, his composure slipping in small, visible ways now. "This is absurd," he said, "even if this were true." "And that's just the ownership," Daniel added. That was the moment everything shifted again. Victor turned slowly. "What does that mean?" Daniel opened the folder. Documents, statements, transactions. He slid them forward. "These transfers were flagged weeks ago," he said. "Offshore routing. Undisclosed allocations tied directly to executive authorization." The room tightened. Harold picked up one of the documents. His eyes moved quickly across the page, then stopped. "At whose authorization?" he asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. "Victor Hudson." The words landed hard. Victor's face went still. "That's not," he started. But this time, the room didn't wait. Questions overlapped. "How long has this been happening? Why wasn't this disclosed? Who else knew?" Sophie stepped back. Just slightly. Just enough. Victor saw it, and something in him shifted. "This is a setup," he said louder now. "You don't just walk in here with—" The door opened. Not forcefully, but final. Two people stepped inside. Badges. "Mr. Hudson," one of them said. The room went silent. "We're with the Financial Crimes Unit," the other added. "We've been reviewing these filings for weeks. We're going to need you to come with us." Victor didn't move. For a second, it looked like he might fight it. But then he looked around. At the board. At the documents. At Sophie, who wasn't looking at him anymore. And something in him gave. "This isn't over," he said. But it didn't carry the same certainty. Not anymore. They stepped forward. He didn't resist. Didn't speak again. As they led him toward the door, the room parted without being asked. No one stopped him. No one defended him. The door closed behind them. And just like that, the man who thought he owned everything walked out with nothing. No one spoke right away. The room stayed still, like it was trying to catch up to what had just happened. Papers remained untouched on the table. Screens still glowed with numbers that no longer meant the same thing they had an hour ago. Harold was the first to move. He leaned back slowly in his chair, exhaling in a way that sounded heavier than before. "This meeting is adjourned," he said. No one argued. Chairs shifted. Quiet footsteps followed. People gathered their things without looking at each other for too long, like eye contact might force a conversation no one was ready to have. Sophie didn't leave immediately. She stood near the far end of the table, her posture no longer as composed as it had been earlier. Her arms were crossed now, not defensively, but like she was holding something in place. For a moment, it looked like she might say something. To me, to anyone. But she didn't. She turned and walked out without a word. I watched her go, not with anger, not even with satisfaction. Just distance. Daniel remained where he was, quietly organizing the documents he had brought in. When he finished, he gave me a small nod. Acknowledgement. Nothing more. I returned it. There wasn't anything else that needed to be said. The room emptied slowly, until it was just me and the silence. I walked to the window at the far end of the boardroom. The city moved on like nothing had happened. Cars passed, people crossed streets, everything continued. Nothing out there knew what had just shifted in here. And maybe that was the point. For years, everything that mattered had happened quietly. Hidden in structures, in decisions, in assumptions no one thought to question. I placed my hand lightly against the glass. feeling the cool surface beneath my fingers. Just a few hours ago, I had been sitting on a bench with $3 in my pocket, trying to understand how everything had disappeared. Now, I understood something else. Not everything that looks stable is secure. I let the thought pass. It didn't need to stay, because this wasn't about what I had gained or what he had lost. It was about something simpler, clearer. I didn't lose everything that day. I just finally saw what was never mine. I stepped back from the window for the first time in a long time. There wasn't anything pressing down on me. No expectation. No version of myself I had to maintain for someone else. Just space and choice. I took the badge from my jacket and set it on the table. I had worn it for years. I just didn't realize it was never meant for me. I didn't need it anymore. Not to walk into this building, and not to walk out. At the door, I paused for a moment. Not to look back, just to take in the quiet. For the first time in years, no one was waiting for me to come back. Then I stepped into the hallway and kept going. Before I go, I want to ask you something. If you were in my position, would you have stayed silent to protect the life you built? Or walked away the moment you realized it wasn't really yours? Tell me what you would have done. If this story stayed with you, you can like it, share it, and stay with me for what comes next. Sometimes the hardest truths are the ones we don't see coming. And sometimes you don't walk away because you're strong. You walk away because there's nothing left to hold on to.